Well, good morning, everyone, from New York City. It is just about 9 o'clock here on the East Coast. It's 6 a.m. out west. I'm Anne-Marie Green in Studio 57. And here's a look at the stories grabbing our attention right now. Heavy fire exchange between Israel and Hezbollah as U.S. officials try to de-escalate tensions in the Middle East and negotiate a Gaza ceasefire deal. We are on the campaign trail. Democrats hope the Harris-Walz ticket will boost support in some down-ballot races, and J.D. Vance claims Donald Trump would veto a federal abortion ban. Cities and towns in Massachusetts are sounding the alarm over a rare mosquito-borne illness as Dr. Anthony Fauci recovers from the West Nile virus. We're going to tell you how to stay safe outdoors. Plus, Boeing plans to bring its Starliner capsule back to Earth without its crew. What that means for the astronauts who have already spent a lot more time at the International Space Station than they planned. And more young people are dropping cardio from their workouts in favor of strength training. How gyms are adjusting to that shift in demand. We're going to begin, though, in the Middle East, where fears of a wider war continue to grow after Israel and Hezbollah exchanged heavy fire this weekend. Israel says that it launched preemptive strikes in Lebanon against the terror group Hezbollah. Then Hezbollah launched rockets toward Israel. Most were intercepted. At least 3 Hezbollah militants and 1 Israeli soldier were killed in the attacks, though. CBS News foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tayeb is following all of this for us from Tel Aviv. Imtiaz, good morning.
Anne-Marie, good morning to you. Well, the cross-border attacks were the largest and most intense exchange of fire between the Israeli military and the powerful Lebanon-based Hezbollah group since the war on Gaza began over 10 months ago, raising concerns a much-feared regional war could be closer than ever. Now, according to the Israeli military, around 100 Israeli fighter jets targeted what they described as thousands of Hezbollah rocket barrels at 40 sites. Hours later, Hezbollah fired what it described as over 300 rockets and drones into Israeli territory. Now, most of that was intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system. However, 1 Israeli naval vessel in the eastern Mediterranean suffered damage, resulting in the deaths of an Israeli soldier. Now, all of this comes at a time in which there are delegations in the Egyptian capital of Cairo trying to hammer out some sort of agreement between Hamas and Israel, which would lead to a ceasefire and hostage release deal. But so far, there's been no major breakthrough. Still, the leaders of both Israel and Hezbollah are signaling that they do not intend to escalate further, for now at least, as the death toll in Gaza continues to rise. Over the weekend, over 200 Palestinians have been killed in a series of Israeli strikes. Anne-Marie.
All right, Imtiaz, thank you. Well, our Nancy Cordes is joining us now from the White House to talk a little bit more about this. So, Nancy, Israel's strike was not a surprise to the U.S. military, but what role did the U.S. play?
They assisted, Anne-Marie, not with weaponry, but with surveillance and reconnaissance as some of these missiles were being fired by Hezbollah from Lebanon into Israel. But Pentagon officials have made it very clear that is as far as the assistance went. And they're continuing to monitor the situation. U.S. officials say that they're basically in constant contact with their Israeli counterparts, and they stress that they fully support Israel's right to defend itself.
And we know that the U.S. military has been ordered to remain in the region. Do we know, I guess, what the purpose of that is, what the messaging is?
Yeah, it's really unusual. There are now 2 U.S. aircraft carrier groups in the region, in and around the Gulf of Oman. There is also a guided missile submarine headed that way as well. It's pretty unusual for the Pentagon to telegraph these moves as loudly as it has been, but it wants to send a message to Iran, to Hezbollah, others in the region, that the U.S. military presence is going to be built up for the foreseeable future until the threat decreases.
You know, it certainly has seemed like all parties involved are very aware that, any misstep could be catastrophic. And so they're trying to be measured. Right. But still, when you're talking about something, an area that there's so much tension, anything could go wrong. Is this situation sort of under I guess, contained or constrained. I mean, how do we describe where things are at right now?
I think you're absolutely right, Anne-Marie. The U.S. and Israel were anticipating this strike from Hezbollah, so they were prepared. Israel likewise signaled that it was going to make this preemptive strike, as it described it, on Hezbollah. Everyone, seems to want to be able to make a statement without sparking a wider war that spirals out of control. There are still wild cards. Iran is a wild card. These negotiations continue to drag on with new expectations from Hamas in particular. And so, it's a situation that everyone is focused on, and yet, absolutely, it's a tinderbox, and they're constantly concerned that new tensions will flare up.
And then just quickly, in regards to the negotiations for a ceasefire, hostage release deal, where do things stand with that?
They continue to drag on. More negotiations took place yesterday in Cairo. The U.S. CIA Director William Burns was there and part of the negotiations, but no breakthrough yet.
All right, Nancy, thank you.
You're welcome.
With just 71 days until the presidential election, the Harris campaign is seeing a big boost in fundraising. Yesterday, it announced that it has raised $540 million since the vice president entered the race just last month, touting a surge in donations during the Democratic National Convention as the party rallied around its new ticket. This week, Vice President Harris will make multiple stops in Georgia Wednesday and then hold a rally in Savannah on Thursday. CBS News campaign reporter Hunter Woodall is covering the Harris campaign for us, and he's in Washington at the Bureau there to talk a little bit about this. So we are post-Democratic National Convention, and the weekend was full of Democratic lawmakers showing support for Vice President Harris, I guess trying to sort of build on that momentum. Here's some of what Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders had to say.
The vice president now has a very good chance to win it. She's certainly going to win the popular vote by millions of votes, and I think she has a great chance to win many of the battleground states, and I intend to do everything that I can to see that she wins.
So during the DNC, I heard some people suggest that maybe the post-DNC momentum that usually happens, maybe it's being sort of front-loaded because there's already all this kind of frenzy over Kamala Harris. What does this look like? Is the momentum going to continue? How is the campaign going to ensure that it continues and grows?
Well, it's a great question, and I think what can't be forgotten is the time frame, as you mentioned. We are 71 days out from Election Day, but early voting in many places starts far sooner than that. So moving forward, I would anticipate a continued focus from the Harris-Walz campaign on those 7 battleground states that will likely decide the presidential election. Now, what can't be forgotten, however, is the struggles that Vice President Harris had as a presidential candidate during the 2020 presidential cycle. I'll continue to be watching, and I'm interested in how she fares when it comes to press conferences, major interviews as that top-of-the-ticket candidate, because that could have a decisive factor in these next 71 days.
And one thing that you heard over and over again during the DNC, though, was a reminder that, if Kamala Harris becomes the president, she also needs a cooperative Congress, which means a focus on those down-ballot races. Is her momentum likely to influence those races?
Well, when we think about, battleground House races, we think of these Midwestern states or, Arizona and the like. The big thing this cycle is Democrats likely only need to win 4 House seats to retake the House from Republicans. They may be able to do that just by winning the battleground frontline House districts Republicans hold in the states of New York and California alone. Those are reliable blue states. Those are not the states you think of typically as getting much attention during the presidential cycle. The seats in those states, though, could make the difference, and Harris, at the top of the ticket, may be able to get Democrats across the finish line there.
All right, Hunter, thank you very much. Meantime, former President Donald Trump is also on the road this week. Today, he's visiting Arlington National Cemetery to mark 3 years since the Abbey Gate bombing in Afghanistan before traveling to Detroit. On Thursday, he heads to the battleground states of Wisconsin and Michigan. CBS News campaign reporter Olivia Rinaldi is following Donald Trump's movements for us and joins us now. So Trump posted, Olivia, on Truth Social, appearing to cast doubt on his upcoming debate with Vice President Kamala Harris, saying in part, quote, "Why would I do the debate against Kamala Harris on that network?" What is the status of this debate? Flip over here. What's the status of this debate? Can you tell us?
Yeah, Anne-Marie, I mean, that's the question. Will they, won't they? Is this debate actually going to happen? There's been so many developments about this debate that they've been hard to follow. Given the fact that this was a debate that President Biden agreed to with Donald Trump, there's been a lot of questions about what has been agreed to by each camp. So you saw last night Trump posting that Truth Social saying, stay tuned, kind of leaving the door open. And we learned this morning that there's a bit of a snafu on why they haven't fully agreed to the debate. And it's because we're learning that Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign has said they want to keep the mics hot the entire time. Now, this is really interesting because before it was former President Donald Trump that wanted to keep the mics hot during his debate in June with President Biden. Now that President Biden is not in the race anymore and it's Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign, they're arguing that the door is open and that they never agreed to have the mics cut throughout the debate. This morning, her campaign sending out a statement saying that Trump should stop hiding behind the mute button. Now, Jason Miller, who's with the Trump campaign, told Politico, who actually broke this story this morning, that they accepted the ABC debate under the exact same terms as the CNN debate. And they said that they are looking, Jason Miller rather, said they are looking for a way to get out of any debate with Trump. So this is a lot of developments about this debate, whether or not it could happen, would happen. So we'll be following this closely to see, are they going to agree on whether or not the mics will be hot, what this debate could look like? There's a lot of developments we'll be following throughout today.
Yeah, I'm really curious because I think a lot of Americans are waiting to see that debate. Let's talk about what Trump's doing today. He's expected to head to Arlington National Cemetery. Why is he stopping there? What do we expect to hear from him?
Yeah, Mary, I mean, it's the third anniversary of the Abbey Gate bombing. That's the bombing that happened at Kabul airport during the evacuation of Afghanistan. Trump has been very close with the families of the 13 service members who passed away. He's there now. He'll be participating in a wreath-laying ceremony, and then he will also lay wreaths at the tombs of two of those service members, Staff Sergeant Darren Taylor Hoover and Sergeant Nicole Gee. Trump has been close with the families of these service members, throughout his campaign, meeting with them several times. And I've seen them actually at several rallies, and he talks to them quite often. So he'll be there today. And really part of that is to highlight from the Trump campaign about foreign policy. As we know, Trump's, during the final days of his administration, had agreed to the pullout of Afghanistan. That was seen through under President Biden's administration. And then we all know what happened, unfortunately, 3 years ago in August when those service members were killed. So Trump today, there in Arlington National Cemetery, honoring them.
All right, Olivia, thank you. Here's what else we're tracking to keep you in the know. At least 37 people were killed in attacks by insurgents in southwestern Pakistan. That's according to local officials. In one of the attacks, the gunmen took people out of vehicles and shot them. Pakistan's government says that it has mostly put a stop to the violence, but there are still some attacks happening. This area of Pakistan is home to the Baluch people, who feel Pakistan's government discriminates against them. North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, watched a demonstration of new attack drones over the weekend. Images from state media showed Kim flanked by officials reviewing the drone test. The exercise comes as the U.S. and South Korea engage in joint military drills. Pyongyang has been ramping up its warfare capabilities in defiance of international sanctions. A man surrendered and confessed to a stabbing attack in Germany. 3 people were killed and 8 others injured Friday during a festival marking the 650th anniversary of the city of Solingen. Prosecutors say that the Syrian man was motivated by the ideology of the Islamic State extremist group, which claimed responsibility for the attack. A 15-year-old boy who allegedly knew about the attack in advance was also arrested. And Walmart is recalling nearly 10,000 cases of apple juice because they may contain inorganic arsenic at harmful levels. The contaminated juice was sold under the Great Value brand in 25 states, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico. No illnesses have been reported so far, though. French authorities reportedly arrested the founder and the CEO of the messaging app Telegram. Up next, we're going to have details on their claims that he failed to moderate criminal activity on the platform. Stay with us. Well, this morning, explosions were heard in Kyiv. After Russia unleashed missiles and drone strikes throughout Ukraine, at least 3 people were killed. Ukraine's Air Force says the Russian drones targeted energy infrastructure across the country. According to Kyiv's mayor, water and power supplies have been disrupted. And Russia says at least 22 Ukrainian drones were intercepted. And a British safety advisor for Reuters was killed in a Russian missile strike at a hotel in eastern Ukraine. Ryan Evans was part of a 6-person crew staying at the hotel when it was hit by a missile Saturday. 2 members of the team were also injured, one seriously. Evans, a former British soldier, was a safety advisor to journalists around the world. And now to reports, the founder of the widely used Telegram messaging app has been arrested outside Paris for allegedly failing to moderate criminal activity on the platform, which has also been used by pro-democracy activists worldwide. Police have yet to confirm his arrest. Holly Williams is following this for us from London. Holly, good morning.
Good morning, Anne-Marie. Pavel Durov, the founder of Telegram and thought to be worth over $15 billion, was apparently arrested at Le Bourget Airport just outside Paris shortly after touching down in his private jet. Now, Durov is reportedly accused of failing to take action to stop the criminal use of his platform. The Telegram app is encrypted, meaning that governments cannot censor or regulate it. Telegram's been criticised for allowing organised crime, terrorists and far-right extremists to use the app. Speaking to 60 Minutes back in 2016 and asked whether law enforcement should be allowed into the app, Durov said, quote, "The interesting thing about encryption is it cannot be secure just for some people." Telegram said in a statement yesterday that it abides by European Union laws, including a law passed in 2022 that seeks to stop the flow of disinformation online. Telegram says it has nearly 1 billion users worldwide. And speaking from personal experience, I can tell you just how widely used Telegram has been during the war in Ukraine, where it's relied on by President Volodymyr Zelensky and by journalists reporting from the front line. It's also been used by pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong, Russia and Iran. Now, Durov was born in Russia but left the country in 2014 after refusing to shut down anti-government content on a previous app that he started. Anne-Marie?
All right, Holly, thank you. The man who led America's charge in the fight against the coronavirus is now recovering from a different, potentially deadly disease, the West Nile virus. Dr. Anthony Fauci was hospitalized for nearly a week after being infected, most likely from a mosquito in his backyard. His symptoms included fever, chills, and severe fatigue. Dr. Fauci is at home and expected to make a full recovery. The West Nile virus is the most common mosquito-borne disease in the U.S. This year, more than 2,200 West Nile cases have been reported in at least 33 states. CBS News chief medical correspondent Dr. John LaPook was on CBS Mornings earlier today to discuss how the virus is spread.
You get it from mosquito. The mosquito, by the way, gets infected by biting an infected bird and then bites a human being. You get a flu-like illness. 1 in 150 people who get infected get a more serious form that involves the central nervous system. You can get inflammation of the brain and the membrane that lines the spinal cord. And that's a much more serious situation there.
State health officials, meantime, in Massachusetts and New York are warning of a high risk of a fatal mosquito-borne disease being spread. The extremely rare Eastern equine encephalitis, also known as Triple E, is spread from horses to people through infected mosquitoes. It's usually found in eastern or Gulf Coast states. The CDC says that there is no treatment or vaccine available. So CBS News national correspondent Errol Barnett is joining us now from Central Park just to talk a little bit more about this. Before we started talking, I'm already feeling itchy. I've never heard of this before. Health officials say Triple E has been found in horses in upstate New York. 1 human case so far, this in Massachusetts. Yeah. What more do we know about this? How is Triple E different than, say, the West Nile virus?
Yeah, you and me both, Anne-Marie, but we've got some bug spray, which everyone should have on supply this summer. Look, we don't want to scare people, but this triple E disease can be deadly in some cases, and there are some reported cases outside the Boston area near Worcester in Massachusetts. And here's the deal. Basically, an infected mosquito will bite a horse. There is no risk that it then can jump from the horse to people or from horses to other horses. But in some rare cases where people are infected by these mosquitoes with triple E, it can lead to the sudden onset of nausea, headache, vomiting, and in some rare cases, Anne-Marie, those symptoms can progress to a much more serious illness, which includes coma. And again, in rare cases, people who suffer with triple E can live on to have neurological impairments in life. And the protections against triple E are the same for any other mosquito-borne virus. It's wear your mosquito repellent, eliminate bodies of standing water, and try to close any windows and screen doors to the outside world during, the end of the summer as we wrap up for the next few months. The mornings and evenings are when mosquitoes are their most active. So triple E is just another one you can add to the list of what to be afraid of, but there are smart ways to protect yourself.
Well, let's talk about one we're a little more familiar with, West Nile virus. There have been 4 cases so far reported in New York State. Cases are pretty low in New York City. But what actions are city officials taking to limit the possible spread?
Well, and it's a good reminder, Anne-Marie, that in all of these cases, it's the elderly and young folks who are the most vulnerable. They can be hit hardest by all of this. Some of the things they're doing here in New York City, for example, to protect against West Nile is eliminating bodies of standing water. People can, in fact, call the city and alert them to any bodies of standing water that they see that need to be, wiped away, I guess, or put down drains. The city is also spraying for mosquitoes, and they're taking 2 different methods. People in New York may have seen trucks coming through and spraying material. They do 2 things. One is called adulticide, and this is where they simply spray for adult mosquitoes in the evening. They do this in residential areas and parks, but they're also doing aerial larviciding, and that basically is killing mosquitoes from helicopters. They don't do this in mostly populated areas. They do this where there are not residential spots, but basically that aerial larviciding kills the mosquito larvae before they become adults. And so it's really about eliminating the mosquitoes. For us, it's wearing, this spray, wearing long sleeves, closing the doors, making sure these mosquitoes don't get around. And they're mostly active in the mornings and the evenings. So the other way, Anne-Marie, to protect yourself is stay inside and keep watching your show and keep connected with us.
Well, I'm not going to argue with that piece of advice, but it is good advice, Errol. I know for me, I usually don't spray until I've already seen a mosquito. So it's good to sort of think about it ahead of time before you head out, right? To avoid being bitten altogether. Errol Barnett, thank you so much. All right, here's a look at what's on deck this morning. After the break, we have an update on the NASA astronauts stranded at the ISS. As the Boeing Starliner capsule they arrived in is sent back to Earth without them. And later on this hour, closing arguments are set to begin today in the trial of Robert Tellis, a former Nevada politician accused of killing a journalist. A former prosecutor breaks down what we're expecting to hear today. And a suspected cyber attack on the Port of Seattle leads to chaos and canceled flights at the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. We're going to explain coming up at noon. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to CBS News. We want to go back to our top story this morning. Ceasefire talks are continuing in Cairo in hopes of reaching peace in Gaza. Over the weekend, Israel and Lebanon's Hezbollah exchanged heavy fire after months of strikes. Israeli forces targeted rocket launchers in southern Lebanon, while Hezbollah targeted military bases in northern Israel. So let's bring in CBS News foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tyab. He has the latest on the situation in the Middle East. So, Imtiaz, it seems like things are quiet right now, but what are the latest in regards to these attacks?
Well, Yeah, Anne-Marie, well, what I can tell you is that in the last few moments, we've been getting initial reports of some Israeli strikes in southern Lebanon. Now, at this stage, it does appear to be part of what we've been saying, which is the regular, frankly, tit for tat that we've seen really for 11 months now of Hezbollah and Israel exchanging fire along Lebanon's southern front and Israel's northern border. But as you so rightly point out, this weekend we saw a dramatic escalation after Israel carried out what it described as a preemptive strike, taking out what it said were thousands of Hezbollah rocket launchers across 40 sites across southern Lebanon, with Hezbollah then launching over 300 rockets and drones into Israeli territory. Now, while both sides are claiming that their strikes were a success, it does appear that both Israel and Hezbollah are trying to diffuse the tensions from really this peak that we've been seeing. But again, as we know, Anne-Marie, that can always change.
And then, of course, this is happening with the backdrop of the war in Gaza continuing. And these ceasefire talks, the Associated Press reports that low-level officials are going to be remaining in Cairo for these talks. Where do the biggest gaps remain? Why is it difficult for them to find common ground here and move forward?
Yeah, Marie, that's a really important question. And on Sunday, there was a lot of hope. You had every delegate there, essentially. You had the Israelis there. You had Hamas there. You had the head of the CIA there. And, of course, the Egyptians and the Qataris all trying to get a deal. Now, that, of course, hasn't happened, but it doesn't mean that the talks are completely over. But there are some big gaps remain. If we put aside the negotiations between Israel and Hamas, there's an issue with Egypt. Israel is currently occupying what's known as the Philadelphia Corridor. It's this narrow strip of land which Egypt has normally been in charge of. Israel saying they need to remain there in order to dismantle what they describe as a Hamas tunnel network, which is used to smuggle things like arms from Egypt into Gaza. And then you, of course, have Hamas saying that they want Israel to withdraw completely from Gaza during this ceasefire, whether it's temporary or not. That, of course, is something that Israel has said that it will not do. Still, it does appear that at least some progress is being made. Of course, people in Gaza so desperate to see the war end. Of course, the families of hostages being held in Gaza also desperate to be reunited with their loved ones.
Of course, MTS, thank you very much. Bringing things back here to the U.S. Just 71 days until Election Day. Both presidential candidates are hitting the road this week. And earlier today, former President Donald Trump visited the Arlington National Cemetery to mark 3 years since the Abbey Gate bombing in Afghanistan. On Thursday, he'll make stops in battleground states, Wisconsin and Michigan. So let's bring in CBS News campaign reporter Torian Small to talk a little bit about what Trump has been up to. So, Torian, explain why, he's visiting Arlington National Cemetery today, why this is, a significant, element of the campaign's messaging.
Yeah, Anne-Marie, like you said, this is the third anniversary since that suicide bombing at the Kabul airport. That killed over 180 people. 13 were U.S. military members. We're expected to hear President Trump tie that chaos to Kamala Harris. As we know, this happened during the U.S. Withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan at that time. We're also expected to see President Trump, or won't see him, as this will be a private meeting, but he'll meet with family members of fallen U.S. soldiers. This, in my mind, is an attempt at him to get ahead of criticisms about the president, especially during the DNC, where there were reportedly private conversations with the president mocking former members of the U.S. military, calling them losers. And then also what we've seen the president rage about later on or this week. We saw him rage about the attacks on the Medal of Honor and conflating that with the Medal of Freedom Award.
But this is something that the Trump campaign has been kind of focusing on, identifying the withdrawal from Afghanistan as one of the failures of the Biden administration.
Right, and that's the contrast that he's trying to draw. He's trying to say that under his administration, we didn't have wars, we didn't have the chaos that we saw in Afghanistan during that withdrawal, although we know that former president was looking to withdraw troops as well. And he's trying to paint the Kamala Harris campaign and administration as one that would bring out more wars, one that would bring out more chaos when it comes to foreign policy.
All right, Torian, thank you. So the White House is also marking 3 years since an ISIS suicide bomber killed 13 U.S. soldiers in an attack outside Kabul airport in Afghanistan. Let's bring in CBS News chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes. So, Nancy, I'm sort of interested. I'm curious about this because I thought maybe the administration, it would not be something that the administration would be eager to talk about. What sort of statement are they putting out today?
Well, the president himself, Anne Marie, is on vacation, so we're not going to hear him or see him talk about this. But he has put out a statement. The Pentagon did as well. I can tell you a little bit about what the president is saying today on this 3-year anniversary. He said that these 13 Americans, and many of them, remember, were quite young, Marines, and the many more that were wounded were patriots in the highest sense. Some were born the year the war in Afghanistan started. This was the deadliest day for members of the American military on this president's watch. So it's quite a somber day for this administration. They have acknowledged that they made mistakes in the withdrawal from Afghanistan that was so chaotic. That ended up having to take place more quickly than they anticipated because the Taliban was storming back into Kabul. They argue, however, that there's plenty of blame to go around. They say that former President Trump tied their hands with the deal that he made with the Taliban to exit quickly. Nevertheless, clearly the former president, as you just mentioned, laying a wreath today, and the Pentagon and the president marking the solemn occasion. And by the way, House Speaker Johnson announced today that he is going to be giving a Congressional Gold Medal to the families of these fallen Marines as well.
And just to sort of take us back a little bit, remind our audience about the details of that attack.
So this was carried out by an ISIS suicide bomber who blew himself up at the Abbey Gate, which was the main gate into Kabul airport, which was really a chaotic scene in the last scramble for the U.S. military, not only to get military members out of the country, but also to get Americans, civilians, American diplomats out of the country. And remember that there were thousands of Afghans crowded outside that gate as well, trying to make their way in because they, too, wanted to flee the Taliban. And so when this member of ISIS blew himself up, not only did you have a bunch of Marines crowded around, many of whom lost their lives, but there were also 170 Afghans who were killed as well.
Yeah, I cannot forget some of the stunning images that came out of those days where you literally saw Afghans hanging on to planes that were trying to take off. Yeah, and this is something that the Biden administration has been having to explain and deal with the criticism ever since. Nancy, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Anne Marie.
So dozens killed across multiple attacks in Pakistan. Why officials are calling it a cowardly act of terrorism? We're going to have those details next. Let's get to more breaking news this hour. Several mass shootings across Pakistan have left more than 36 people dead, and the violence erupted in at least 3 separate attacks. The country's military says that it killed 12 insurgents in the southwestern part of the country. Members of that group also blew up a bridge for trains and carried out other attacks in the region. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Holly Williams is live in London for us following one of the deadliest days in the region. So to start things off, do we know who is behind this attack and what may have motivated them, Holly?
Good morning, Anne-Marie. Well, officials in Pakistan are actually now saying that around 60 people were killed in the attacks. That includes several police officers, some militants who were killed by state security, and others who were taken out of buses and trucks by the militants and then shot dead. A separatist group known as the BLA has claimed responsibility for the deadly violence. This was in Pakistan's Baluchistan province, which is in the southwestern part of the country. It's an area where I've actually spent some time, and violent separatist groups have actually been operating there for many years. It's a resource-rich area with a lot of investment from China. Pakistan's president called the attack barbaric and vowed that the perpetrators would not escape justice.
Holly, I know you're going to keep an eye on that story, but I want to ask you about another developing story. This has to do with the app Telegram. The CEO, apparently, was arrested as he was getting off of his private jet. This is fascinating because I feel like this is the sort of case that probably wouldn't happen here in the U.S. because we have sort of different laws that protect these social media platforms. But can you tell us about the charges that he's facing and how this unfolded?
Well, Anne-Marie, this is such an interesting story with ramifications for anybody who uses Telegram. Pavel Durov, the founder of Telegram and thought to be worth over $15 billion, was apparently arrested on Saturday at Le Bourget Airport just outside Paris, shortly after touching down in his private jet. Now, Durov is reportedly accused of failing to take action to stop the criminal use of his platform. The Telegram app, as you know, is encrypted, meaning that governments cannot censor or regulate it. Telegram's been criticised for allowing organised crime, terrorists and far-right extremists to use the app. Telegram said in a statement yesterday that it abides by European Union laws, including a law passed in 2022 that seeks to stop the flow of disinformation online. Now, Telegram says it has nearly 1 billion users worldwide. And speaking from personal experience, I can tell you just how important Telegram has been during the war in Ukraine, where it's been relied on by President Vladimir Zelensky to get his messages out and by journalists reporting from the front line. It's also been used by pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong, Russia and Iran. Durov was born in Russia but left the country in 2014 after refusing to shut down anti-government content on a previous app that he started. Anne-Marie.
We're going to watch this one closely, Holly. Thank you. Former President Donald Trump is in Falls Church, Virginia, where he's taking questions from reporters. So let's listen.
We can't have another dummy as a president, okay? We cannot have a dummy. And the people from Vietnam agree with that.
President Trump, would you want the microphones muted in the debate whenever you're not speaking?
We agreed to the same rules. I don't know. It doesn't matter to me. I'd rather have it probably on. But the agreement was that it would be the same as it was last time. In that case, it was muted. I didn't like it the last time, but it worked out fine. I mean, ask Biden how it worked out. It was fine. And I think it should be the same. We agreed to the same rules. Same rules and same specifications. And I think that's probably what it should be. But they're trying to change it. The truth is they're trying to get out of it because she doesn't want to debate. She's not a good debater. She's not a smart person. She doesn't want to debate. But when I looked at the hostility during the weekend, you watch it this week with George Slopadopoulous, and the Vietnamese didn't get that one. You got it. Right? Yes, sir. If you didn't get it, I couldn't endorse you. But no, we want to have fairness. We have to bring fairness back to the country. And we have to have a president. We are the closest to World War III, I believe, that we've ever been right now, right this second. And we have a man that just took a vacation in California. He was on the beach, and he came back today. Where's he going? Delaware. Why? Another vacation. He's going for another week. That's not the Vietnamese. They're hardworking people, aren't they?
All right, we've just been listening to former President Donald Trump. He's at an event in Virginia. He's going to be hitting a number of battleground states over this week. But what he's talking about is the debate that's scheduled between himself and Kamala Harris for September 10th, I believe, on ABC. The two campaigns seem to be squabbling over some of the guidelines, specifically whether or not the mic will stay on or be muted when one of the other candidates is talking. So hopefully they can figure that out before debate night. In the meantime, coming up, NASA is turning to SpaceX in an effort to bring home 2 astronauts that are stuck in orbit. The new timeline for when they could return back to Earth. The first ever spacewalk by non-governmental astronauts will be at least a day late. SpaceX pushed the Polaris Dawn mission's launch back, saying that the extra time allows crews to finish pre-flight checks. The all-civilian crew is aiming for a historic 5 days in orbit, including the first ever spacewalk during a private mission. Meanwhile, NASA has a plan to bring back those 2 astronauts who took the troubled Boeing Starliner to the International Space Station. But it means Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams will be there for another 6 months. So let's bring in senior national correspondent Mark Strassman to talk a little bit more about it. So it's like one of those good news, bad news. Good news is you're going to be able to go home. The bad news is you got to wait till February to do it. Have we heard from the 2 astronauts at all since this announcement that they'll be stuck on board for another 6 months?
Hey, Emery, no, we haven't heard from them. We may hear from them later this week, but for now, all we know is that they have heard what the decision is and agree with the decision to come home, not on Starliner, but on Boeing's competitor, SpaceX. And that will mean, as you mentioned, another 6 months in orbit. So essentially, this is really a period of adjustment for everybody involved. Remember that when Williams and Wilmore launched on June 5th, the original mission was supposed to be for 8 days, and now they're going to spend 8 months on the ISS. And so there's bound to be now a period of transition. They're not just short-term visitors; they're long-term occupants of the on the ISS, and so they're going to become part of the regular rhythm, the daily rhythm of life on the ISS, which is pitching and doing experiments and so forth. But it is going to be a period of adjustment for everybody, for the astronauts themselves, for all the other astronauts on the ISS, and of course for Williams and Wilmore. They have families. And again, everybody's going to have to adjust to the fact that what was thought to be a short-term mission is now going to become a long-term mission, Anne-Marie.
That's a whole lot of overtime pay, I suspect, if they're getting paid to be up there. Anywho, can you sort of talk a little bit more about NASA's decision? Why are they deciding to go with SpaceX instead of Boeing to get them home?
Well, if you remember, Boeing Starliner had some issues on the flight up to the ISS. There were issues with helium leaks and with these maneuvering engines called thrusters, 5 of which conked out at least briefly. And so the decision for NASA was whether the risk was worth taking to fly them back on Starliner or whether to switch and go with Boeing's competitor, SpaceX. And in the end, NASA says it was a unanimous decision. They decided to go with SpaceX, which is, has got to be a setback for Boeing, a bit of an embarrassment for Boeing. Boeing really thought it was ready. They thought that Starliner was perfectly safe to fly. But NASA engineers in the end disagreed, and now the astronauts will stay for another 6 months until the mission is over.
Yeah, in terms of sort of PR, it's kind of the worst thing that Boeing needed. Mark, thank you very much. So there's another heat wave coming through. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with a look at the national forecast. Grant, what are you tracking?
Good morning, Anne-Marie. Look, over the last week or so, we were watching a lot of the heat across the central and southern plains. Now that heat is being sent to the north and east, to the Midwestern states, where we're starting to typically feel more like fall, with temperatures only peaking in the mid and upper 70s. But already this morning, temperatures are well into the 80s. So the heat is already on. In fact, several places underneath excessive heat warnings or excessive heat watches for heat spreading east tomorrow. But then also heat advisories in effect back into the plain states. Look at some of these forecast highs across the Midwest and central plains today. Kansas City, 100, feeling like 107 degrees, but it's really up north. Places like Minneapolis peaking near 90, but feeling like the triple digits. Even more heat across the Midwest into tomorrow. So very hot and humid conditions through the central plains and Midwestern states, still tracking severe weather up toward the northern tier. Anne-Marie, back to you.
All right, Grant, thank you very much.